Hi guys, it's Tamara. I'm back with another video today. Thank you so much for being with me. We're going to close out our Friday talking about the neurobiology of personality disorders. And one of the reasons why we're going to be talking about that today is because on Monday and Wednesday, I want to introduce you guys to the topic of stalking. I've gotten a lot of emails over the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday about stalking. And I want to be able to give you guys some information about it. But before we get started with that, thank you so much for being with me today, guys, on my channel. And if you're new, I encourage you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button over here so that you can stick around for other videos that are going to be coming up, because we're going to be talking about a lot of interesting topics throughout the year this year. So let's just go ahead and jump right in, okay? I want to introduce you guys to a few important brain structures. So I have them written down here so that I can be reminded of them. I'm going to explain what they are, and then I'm going to define for you the neurobiology of personality disorders. Okay, so there are multiple structures within our brain. Now let me explain what the brain is, and this is going to be very basic. I just want you to kind of have a mental image. So the brain is this little small ball of ridges and grooves. It's kind of the size of an orange. As the individual grows into adolescence and into adulthood, it grows a little bit bigger. The brain is encased in the skull. The skull bones is what surrounds the brain. The brain basically is like a pinkish color, right? It's this color. It's a light pink color. And if you can just imagine something that's a light pink color and it has all these grooves and crevices, you've got the brain. Now, some research suggests that the brain is huge, right? It's like a balled up piece of paper inside the brain. Inside the skull. Let me show you this. I'm going to demonstrate this for you. I demonstrate this a lot with my kids, and they absolutely love it, guys. They're like, wow, this is so cool. Science and therapy. So, all right. So, okay, let's look at this together. So this is your brain, okay? It's a balled up piece of paper. If you take the brain out of the skull and you unfold it and unravel it, okay, this is what you're going to get. But the way you're going to get it is it's going to be pretty huge. It's really cool, you know, to think that we can hold that much space in our brain. You know, a balled up piece of paper is actually basically the brain. Inside that brain is a lot of neurobiological and physiological processes, and at some point we're going to talk about the overall and generalized development of the brain, but for the purposes of our discussion Monday and Wednesday of next week, we're just going to talk about the development of personality disorders. Okay, so the brain is engulfed or encased in the skull. It is being protected in the skull and basically floating on what's called cerebral fluid. It's this fluid that's a bodily fluid, and it kind of helps the brain stay suspended in its fluid. So that's why when you hit your head, your brain hits up against the skull and it bruises and it becomes a concussion, because the brain is not being held by anything. It's floating in this cerebral fluid. All right. So that's the general idea of what the brain is. Now, the outer part of the brain is called the cerebrum, and the cerebrum, I'm going to actually put that over here for you so that you can see it. The cerebrum is basically the most mature and most sophisticated part of the brain, because it allows us to think. It allows us to think at a higher level than animals and mammals, right? It allows us to have human abilities to kind of think and process information. It gives us our sophisticated processes, right? Our ability to think and our ability to memorize things, and our ability to make calculations and have intuition and kind of figure things out, right? That's the cerebrum. Now, inside the cerebrum, we have brain chemicals like norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, GABA or glutamate. Those are all chemicals in the brain that influence not only our emotions, but also our actions, right? How we process process things, how we see things, how we look at things, how we function, even how we feel, right? So those brain chemicals, serotonin, glutamate, GABA, which are basically the same thing, serotonin and norepinephrine, those brain chemicals are known as neurotransmitters. And they're very important to help us manage our emotions, depression, our anxiety, that kind of stuff. Okay, it plays a major role in personality disorder development. Then we have different parts of the brain. We have what's called the prefrontal cortex. That's the front part of the brain that helps us control our information processing. It also helps us control our decision making and our impulsivity. And our personality is developed there as well. The prefrontal cortex, it's behind the forehead. Okay. Then we also have another important part of the brain, which are the temporal lobes. They kind of help us with memory and processing memory. We have the amygdala and the limbic system, which I call the emotional brain. A lot of my fellow colleagues call it that as well. It helps us process those memories in an emotional way. It kind of is the seat of our empathy and our emotions. Okay. The other part of the brain that is important for you to know is the thalamus and the hypothalamus, and that kind of helps us with our drives, our sex drives, our hunger and our eating urges and things like that. All right, so that's like a really brief 101 brain class. What does all of this have to do with personality development? Well, the brain, as it develops and as it is influenced by environment, right? Environment kind of provides that extra pressure, right? Here's the brain. All right, conceptualize this with me. Here's the brain. Environmental influences like bad school environment, bad neighborhoods, gang activity, abusive and neglectful parents, trauma, poor parenting techniques and styles, all of that kind of stuff. Let's add in there bullying as well, kind of presses onto the brain, right? It kind of causes this extra pressure on the brain, which kind of causes the behavioral and the psychological consequences that we see, the gang activity, the anger, the depression, the suicidal thoughts, right? The low self-esteem, the post-traumatic stress disorder, the hallucinating, the delusions, right? The pressure from the environment kind of weighs down the brain, and all of the normal free-flowing production of chemicals and brain structures are very dismantled when the environment gets involved. Okay, there's a lot of molecular and DNA structure changes happening in the brain when the environment gets on top of everything. Now, when we're thinking about the cerebrum, which is our thinking processes, you know, when personality disorders are being kind of molded and shaped within the individual, there's definitely a disturbance in cognition and a disturbance in the organization of information. And what I mean by that is that perception is different, organizing thoughts are very different. The way things are kind of conceptualized and computed in the brain is very different, right? That's why we can't quite understand the mind of some sociopaths, because they have a very different way that they view things, a disturbance in cognition and a disturbance in the organization of information. All right, and then we also have in addition to that, we talked about the prefrontal cortex, which helps us with impulse control and decision making, right? The prefrontal cortex. If that is underdeveloped or disturbed in any way, what happens is the individual, as they're developing throughout adolescence, there's a low threshold for anything, right? There's a low threshold for anger. There's a low threshold for impulsivity. There's a low threshold for anxiety. They just automatically snap, right? There's excessive amygdala activity, so they're highly emotional. There's also diminished prefrontal controls. Again, decision making is very poor. The arrival at concrete information is very difficult and complex. So personality disorders really involves three things, okay, guys? Biology, physiology, and environment, genes, that kind of stuff. So as we move along, we're going to continue to talk about this topic. Thanks so much, guys. I'm trying to get under 10 minutes for joining me today in this video. I encourage you to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful to you. But I will see you on Monday with a new video. Bye, guys.